I don't think I've ever talked to you in English.
I'm sure you have.
But not for like a longer period of time, right?
Correct.
You've never. Yeah, a couple of recipients, a couple of mothers have asked me about my background, my family. Right now I'm doing some donations in London, and my brother, who's studying at the Cambridge University, was right around the corner basically, so I decided, just head by, have a little chat with him, and record a little interview for all of you guys, because excitingly, my brother is basically, going to be a biological donor uncle by summer this year. So, just to start it off, maybe just tell the audience and the people watching this video, especially the recipients watching this video, a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, like your background, before we go in depth into the whole donor conceived part.
Sure. My name is Michael. I'm Daniel's brother. I was born in the United States. And our family, so our mother, Daniel, and we moved to Germany when I was about 4 years of age. I went to high school in Germany. After high school, I decided to go to the United Kingdom to pursue my undergrad studies, which I'm currently doing right now. I'm my third year, I'm a finalist, studying economics, law, and geography here at the University of Cambridge. And going forward, I plan on pursuing a further degree, preferably in the area of economics, international economics. I've got some exciting things lined up, but I don't want to jinx any of them. It's my pleasure to be here with my brother Daniel, and to have this little conversation. Because I'm really supportive of his donor endeavors.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and you are so lucky to sit here because, as you might know, how the story goes was our mother decided to, conceive children through a donor. And I think you know the story as well. It goes that with her last try, and I just asked her the other day, do you know how expensive we were? Have you ever heard the number?
I think I was slightly more expensive.
But you don't know the price, right? Have you ever heard the cost?
About $30,000?
That was one try. That was the last try. So the expense of having us both was around $150,000 paid by the recipient, and another $150,000 paid for by the health insurance, or by the insurance back then. So it's $300,000 total to have both of us, which doesn't, it's not supposed to sound like a flex now, but it's just an interesting fact, and I think it shows how hard our mother tried to have us. She was a little bit older than most women when they decide to have a child. She was in her mid-30s, and she had some complications, which is why it was so super expensive for her. And that was $300,000 was like 1999, 2000s kind of money, right? Nowadays, it's much more than that. I look it up, and I think it's towards $500,000 by now. So yeah, you were super lucky. You know how the story goes with the last try was a 30% chance for you to be around, to be here. Of course, a lot of things had to happen in the past for you to be here, but that in that moment, our mother knew she'd have a 30% chance. Her money was running out, no more money left, and you got out, or you were made.
I got out.
You were made. You were made because in vitro was successful. What's your oldest memory of being donor conceived? Like, how far looking back do you remember knowing that you were donor conceived, and what kind of a relationship did you have growing up being donor conceived?
I don't think there ever was a single point of revelation. I think it basically grew up knowing that I was donor conceived. But if you ask me about one specific point where I realized, okay, my family background is slightly different compared to others, was in Germany in kindergarten, where I talked to a bunch of just friends or peers, and I told them, well, I don't have a father, and they said, you must have a father. Everyone does. And I said, no. Of course, at that point in time, I hadn't known my biological father yet. And of course, I knew there used to be some male person who donated his sperm. I was under no illusion, but I expressed it saying that I didn't have a father. And my friends, my peers were so shocked and said, no, that's impossible. But I was certain that I was telling the truth. And I think that was, well then, of course, in order to resolve the dispute, we went to one of our supervisors. And she was also slightly confused. But I was adamant that I did not have a father. Anyways,
you were like, what father are you guys talking about? Like, I go home every day, there's no father, right?
Exactly. So I think that was a point where I realized, okay, in this regard, I am slightly different than others.
Interesting. And then, do you feel like you've had certain advantages growing up with your half-siblings, or certain advantages growing up having a father, or maybe disadvantages where you were like, hey, was a father figure missing? Because obviously you've gotten really far in your life now, right? You're at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. You're doing really well here. You're keeping up with your peers. You're, a super smart guy. You're healthy. You're fit. Looking around university, there's a lot of like skinny dudes rocking around too. You're not one of those, right? You can be smart and skinny, but you'd rather be smart and fit. So do you think that who you are today is also shaped by the fact that you grew up with no father? Because studies show that childhood is harder for many without a father, and that they turn out different without a father than with a father. But that's just statistically seen.
If you allow me to respond to these statistics, I'm pretty sure they reveal a statistical association between absent fathers and poor life outcomes for children. But there's a confounding variable, which is that most children that end up without a father, with an absent father, they simultaneously also tend to grow up in socioeconomically disadvantaged households.
Right.
So we have this confounding variable. The direct connection between absent fathers and poor life outcomes is much more spurious than what just these pure statistics would show. And this kind of leads me to what I actually want to say, namely that I don't think I'd suffered any disadvantages growing up without a father, because our mother was really invested, and she provided me with most of the support I needed throughout my childhood to develop my personality, to develop my curiosity, intellect, all these things that are crucial throughout your early childhood and also later on. So I think no, to quite straightforwardly answer your question, I can't think of a single thing that I perceive to be a disadvantage in relation to growing up without a father, because my mother was there, our mother was there. And quite frankly, that was enough. But, and this is a very crucial but, I don't know the counterfactual, meaning I have the only base on which I can judge is what I actually experienced. There's no counterfactual which I can compare my reality to. So I think potentially I might have lacked a male adult figure that I could refer to when it comes to things that are idiosyncratically gender-based. Growing up, I mean, going through puberty, it's a gender-specific experience, correct? Also, when it comes to mating and romance, that's, I think, also pretty gender-specific. Of course, my mother was able to provide guidance, but definitely not in the way a father could have. So I think in this kind of very specific context, I might have lacked something, but I don't think that has resulted in any tangible disadvantages as of now. sorry for waffling a bit.
No, it's super interesting to hear your opinion.
But in order to maybe sum up my point in 2 or 3 sentences, I've never felt disadvantaged growing up without a father. Because my mother was invested and present. But I think it's nonetheless important and it's beneficial to have, how do you call it, an open donor?
A known donor.
Known donor,
yeah.
Non-anonymous donor. I think that can be quite beneficial. It's not indispensable for the successful life story of a donor-conceived child, but I think it quite possibly be very beneficial.
Interesting, yeah, because for me, I didn't have a male role model growing up, and I know situations where a male role model might have been useful at some point. I remember that when you and we got into puberty, right? You got into puberty younger. You got into puberty before I did, and then I got into puberty, and we both kind of had this like testosterone coming up, wanting to make decisions at home, feeling dominant, and then our mother being a bit, overwhelmed with that situation as well, having a full-time job, 50, 60 hours a week as a professor, and then 2 boys at home going crazy, being like, we want the house, this is our place now, or whatever. We want to make the rules. And so, there's a few situations where I think, okay, it could have been beneficial, but overall, I think, first of all, we had each other, right? And that's another thing we could talk about forever, probably, because we could bounce off each other, we could mirror each other, we could look at each other and learn from each other. I kept on trying to pass on my experiences, like going into the next school, like the 5th grade, I was trying to pass on that experience to you and say, make friends early, make the right friends early, and that kind of stuff. I was, you and we could go and play together, we could spend time together, we were best friends, right? We were just, doing everything together if we could. We were outside of school, right? We were just best friends. We were doing everything together. We were playing every stupid game together, like Playmobil and Legos and going on adventures or little adventures and trips, doing stupid shit, luckily we never did like crazy stupid stuff. We didn't end up getting like drunk together, or we didn't end up taking drugs together and that kind of stuff. So I think we were lucky in a way that our boundaries, maybe given to us by our mother, but also the boundaries we have for ourselves, were kind of good boundaries, right? But I do know for myself that, and that's something I argue for recipients that want to have a child but are worried that the child would grow up without a fatherly figure, is that first of all, I'm trying to be an open and known donor, and the child can reach out to me. But secondly, there's so many male role models out there on the internet and in your own family that you can choose of. And you didn't have that like 10 or 20 years ago, or we didn't have it as much. Right nowadays, you can tell your child, hey, this professor is super interesting. He has a lot of videos online. You can learn from him, right? Or you can say, for me, it was my grandfather, right? My grandfather and we have a really close relationship when it comes to business or to work, and he kind of, was involved in my life. And also, my father, him and we are in contact and we talk. So I agree with you that a male role model is important, but I think to some degree I had one, and to some degree you, having an older brother, had one too.
Yes.
Not like father. I wasn't like father to you, but I was an older brother. I was a male role model who was advanced by 2 or 3 years older, and could pass on his experiences, good and bad, to you, and you could look at that and say, I want to do it differently, like the way, for example, you treated disruptions with our mother, right? You could look at how I was very, I could be very annoyed and loud, and I wanted to, I wanted to take control if I wasn't happy, and you looked at that and you kind of became more reserved when conflicts arose at home, and you were more, just like, okay, leave me alone. And that was a smarter way of handling these conflicts, for sure, right? So I think to some degree you had a role model, and I think that boys are growing up, if they don't have a role model, they will kind of in some way find a role model. And the matter is just, who is that role model going to be? Is it going to be your older brother, or is it going to be some rapper who raps about taking drugs and drinking and alcohol, and just like you say, kids that grow up in poor conditions, poor families, they might think the neighbor who's selling drugs is like a role model, and then they end up like that too. So we were lucky that our mother was educated, smart, and we weren't part of any difficult socioeconomic groups or environments. So yeah, that's very interesting. One thing that I think about a lot, and you just said it, you think an open or known donor is interesting, is that I'm very involved as a half sibling. You are more the type of person, you live your own life, and you don't have too much contact to your half siblings and your father. How's the relationship between your father, Carlos, and you, and how's your relationship to your half siblings? Do you feel like do you ever feel any kind of pressure to having to have a relationship? Do you ever feel like you want more of a connection with them? How do you feel about that nowadays?
So first of all, I've never met our biological father, Carlos. I've never met him in person, but I do know him, and we've texted. We are in contact. We stay in touch. And then regarding my half siblings, I've met a handful of them. I think maybe 4 or 5 or so. And I also stay in touch with some of them. And yes, you're completely accurate when saying that I'm much more reserved than you are, because I think I'm already so invested with my current life trajectory and with the people I know, just the environments I put myself in, that at this point in time, I don't think it would be, of course it would be nice, but I don't feel the need to reach out to a completely whole new layer of networks and relations. Because I'm right here in Europe right now, kind of fostering, building my networks and getting to know people. And I think that's somewhat exciting enough. And whether I feel pressurized, no, not at all. I think it's a very great privilege, which I'm aware of, that at any point in time, I could reach out to my father, potentially even, just flying out to the US and meet him if I wanted to. And I'm aware of that opportunity, and I will seize it at some point, and I'm looking forward to that moment. But as of now, I've got so many other things in my mind that are completely unrelated to that part of myself, that I just choose to, to commit my resources somewhat, more deliberately, and maybe more just to allocate them more, less indiscriminately, but more concentrated on my kind of sphere of influence in life right now, if that makes sense. What was the second part of your question?
No, that you answered my question with your.
And I think one other thing that I wanted to mention, I think you're somewhat special when it comes to the relationship that you have with your father, with our father. But I think, look, if we compare the two of us, you spent much more time in the US than I did, 2.5 years more than I did, and especially during the early stage of your lives, I think 2.5 years can be quite weightful. So I moved to Germany when I was of kindergarten age, not even having entered primary school, whereas you had already entered primary school. So I think, just generally speaking, not only in terms of our comparative relationship to our father, but also your say affiliation with the United States, with your roots, with your early childhood roots, are much stronger than in my case. So you might want to also factor that into our comparison. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been kind of telling you, go visit, go out there and hang out with them. But at the same time, I know that at some point you will do that anyways. So it's just a matter of time. And every time we see each other, I just kind of ask, when are we going to do this? When are we going to do that? Just for me to know, because I really like spending time with you, and I know how involved you have to be in your university, and I'm really looking forward to a point in time or a situation where you're like, okay, Daniel, I have some freedom now, I have time now, let's go crazy, let's do something fun, like visit our half siblings in California, go on a trip to California or some other place, like South America or whatever, Thailand. So yeah, that's I absolutely agree. With your, you growing up being donor conceived, and now just a couple months ago you were informed that I'm going to be a donor or that I'm donating, and right after I had my first success, a girl in Los Angeles that is on her way now. How did you feel about that? How did you feel hearing that? What did that kind of do with you, and how would you imagine a relationship between because a relationship between a father and an uncle is always different, right? Like I would even say I have a closer relationship to my biological donor father than I have to my uncle, and most people, of course, they have a closer relationship to their father than their uncle. How would you imagine a relationship between you and potential nieces and nephews around the world that might look at you and say, hey, how interesting, I want to study at Cambridge too, I want to learn a bit from him or hear him and talk to him. How would you handle that, or how would you wish that kind of relationship to be? Because in some way they're extended family for you and to you too.
First of all, I would be curious to get to know them, mainly because of our genetic relationship, because I'm quite aware of the importance of genetics, and that if you basically pass on my genes, I would be interested in getting to know your offspring, people I'm genetically related to. So I think that would already create a layer of maybe trust and togetherness that I would definitely, would embrace. And if they sought out for any guidance, I would feel honored, because especially when I won't have had any kids yet, I think I would feel very honored to have like kind of little people sorry, just children all around the world who reach out to me for guidance. I would love that, genuinely. Whether I would want to be a proper part of the network and being very active and engaged, that's a different question. Because, as mentioned already, I tend to be really focused on my immediate surroundings and my very just proximate sphere of influence. So I might not, be able to maintain a very close relationship to each and every one of them, but I'd be very happy to at least get to know them and just to be available in case the need arises to contact me, to get in touch with me for guidance or anything alike.
That's exciting. Yeah, our mother just said the other day we should get out there and we should go look at some babies, So I think it's going to be very exciting to just see how the whole thing develops, because it is also a very modern way of choosing your offspring and choosing your future. I talked to one of the highest managers at 23andMe, and she worked and reported to the CEO. And the CEO of 23andMe, and 23andMe is like, they tell you where your genes are from, so you can send your genes there, and they're like very much on genes. And she said, choose your child or your father by genes, and don't choose the father by love so much, right? Because the genes will be around for 18 years and for the rest of the child's life. If you just, say some recipients, they want a baby now or next week or next weekend, then they just ask in the groups, who's around this week. I think it's so interesting and modern that people nowadays can say, this person on the other side of the planet, I appreciate his genes, I appreciate his network of family, I want him to be the father of my child. And that's something we haven't had ever before. So I'm really interested to kind of see how it develops, what comes out of it. Maybe there's going to be a donor conceived child again who wants to become a donor too. And considering that, or concerning that, have you ever considered to be a donor as well? Because I get a lot of requests and recipients also in the United Kingdom. There's a lot of same-sex couples in the United Kingdom. There's a lot of single moms in the United Kingdom. They keep asking me all the time. And I can't get out here, fly out here regularly. But basically, you and I, we share the same genes, right? You don't have that with anyone else in your family where you have the same mix of genes other than your brother, right? Mm-hmm. That's you wouldn't have that with your cousins or with your uncle, whatever. Have you considered seeing my story and kind of seeing the pros and cons of being a donor? Because there's some pros, like network of blood for your offspring, even your own children someday. Getting around, traveling a lot is a pro. A con might be that in the dating world, girls look at it kind of confused. A con might be that it is work involved. It is time to travel there. What's your opinion on that? Have you thought about it, seeing me do it?
To be honest, no, I haven't thought about it. And as of now, it's not an option for me. Because it just doesn't appeal to me as of yet. The idea, of course, does. I think it's a great idea, and I'm really supportive of what you're doing. But when it comes to myself, it's a lot of work, isn't it? It's a lot of commitment. It's a lot of energy that you invest. It's time and energy that you invest. And so I think it's a life choice that you make at the end of the day. It's not a cycle. It's not something that you can pursue with like 50% commitment. You need to be 100% in, because it's not only time and energy that you invest, but also it's your genes that you pass on, and you need to be very sure about that. Because I think there is an emotional component to donating. And taking all this together, I haven't been interested in pursuing that.
Yeah.
Because there are other things in my life that, as of now, I'm much more focused on. But as I said, I find really admirable that you yourself have chosen to take that path. For me, maybe in the future at some point, I don't know. But as of yet, that's something that I think you're responsible for.
It's my job to pass on our genes. That's funny. Because I just talked to Kyle yesterday, and he has a brother too. And his brother is very supportive. I think even in some part financially, but I don't want to say anything wrong. I would consider Kyle as a kind of community friend of mine now, because we had a great chat yesterday. So it's funny that you say something similar, or the relationship we have might be similar to the one he has with his brother. However, they're not donor conceived, but he started being a donor when he was, I think, 20. So he did very early on. This has been donating a couple of times every month. But yeah, okay. Then let's get to the last question, which is kind of, because I expect the recipients and the children to look at this video and maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, maybe even my biological grandchildren at some point, and I'd be really interested to kind of look back someday with them at the video and say, oh, how interesting. Was it what Michael thought back then, what he was going to do in the future, in the next 10 or 20 years? Do you have kind of an outlook, what you want to achieve, where you want to be, maybe financially, maybe physically, maybe relationship-wise with the family? Do you have like a picture of yourself in 10 or 20 years?
When it comes to health, money, and profession, I think I do. When it comes to family life, much less so. I think the idea of having a family is beautiful, of course, but it's just such a vague idea that I would have a difficult time, committing myself to one certain vision when it comes to this particular aspect of my life. When it comes to health, of course, I hope to maintain the good health that I have right now. Financially, I want to be comfortable. I want to be, financially liberated. Not, excessively wealthy, but have enough resources to have the freedom to reject options and to embrace options. And I think that's where I want to head towards. Professionally, I want to combine, and now I'm going to quote our grandfather, I want to combine the useful and the pleasant. So I know what I'm good at to an extent, and I know what I like, and I want to combine that. And I think I'm headed towards that particular direction, professionally, and I hope that this trajectory is going to continue. I want to travel around the world. Professionally, I want to get to know as many cultures as possible. I want to leverage the particular skill set that I have, which has a lot to do with, I think, people and relationships, and being out there, being out in some interesting places in the world, making a difference, whether that's in the private sector or public sector. I don't mind, as long as I can, really just make a difference and make something interesting, do something interesting, where I can look back upon at some point in my life and think, oh wow, that was kind of cool when I did that. That was interesting, and I'm glad I did it. I think travel is an important aspect here, and also intellectually stimulating. That's important also to me. Intellectually stimulating.
You like learning and traveling.
Learning, traveling, getting to know people.
Sports, too.
Sports, yeah. Sports is like a side hustle.
Yeah.
I would say so. I mean, I've been very, very vague, describing my future ambitions, but that's because my future ambitions are pretty vague, also to myself. But yeah, I mean, I hope
it's going to be a surprise then in 10 or 20 years to see the trajectory and the path that you've taken. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing with our viewers a lot about yourself, for being so open. I think a lot of people will look at this video and think, what a wonderful biological uncle is sitting right there. Is there anything you want to say to recipients, or any wishes you might have to recipients before they decide to reach out to me and be a donor?
Well, first of all, obviously, he's my brother. I think just don't try to advertise, but all the good attributes and characteristics that I think of myself as having, I think Daniel shares them to a very large extent. So I personally, if I was searching for a donor, naturally I would choose him. But beyond that, I think you should be, the choices that you're making, I think you should be immensely proud of that, because it's a form of independence and just the will to form one's own life according to one's own desires and plans. I find that incredibly empowering, not only because of my own background, just as a principle, that you, instead of just waiting passively for life to happen to you, you seize power over your own life, and actively try to seek out and enable the version of the future that you want for yourself. I find that quite admirable, first of all. And then, just I think as a final note, I wish you, the best luck for that, because I know it can be quite difficult, it can be quite challenging to pursue this path. But I think at the end of the day, it's worth it. And from what our mother has always told us, it was incredibly difficult for her to bear the two of us, financially, emotionally, also socially to an extent. But at the end of the day, I mean, it was worth it for her. So I think that that's kind of what I want to convey, is that it is going to be worth it. It will be difficult, but it's going to be worth it. And I wish just the best luck to you, and that I may, at some point, I would be very happy to, at some point, be able to call myself the uncle, biological uncle, of one of your children. Thank you for listening.
Great finishing words. Thanks so much, Michael.
Thank you, Daniel.